Yeah, we're going live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So this is a session as part of the series that we have prepared for you by the Youth Committee of Alpha Group, which is part of the Youth Committee of Alpha Group, which is part of our organization, nonprofits. And this is mainly for high school students and maybe university students in the first couple of years that they want to choose their career path and they want to learn about various university majors. Today, we have the honor of having Dr. Azadeh Yazdan, who is here with us. She's an expert in the field of bioengineering, and she's a professor at the University of Washington. So she's going to talk about her career path a bit. So I'm not going to talk much about where she came from and what was her journey. So I just briefly mentioned that she was graduated from Amir Kabir University of Technology in Tehran. She got her bachelor's degree there, and for master's degree, she went to University of Tehran, which is very interesting to me because we were schoolmates. So I graduated from the same university, but a few years apart, of course. And she got her PhD from University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And I'm not going to talk about the details of her research because she's going to talk about that. I just mentioned that Dr. Yazdan Shahmurad is the recipient of 2 postdoctoral fellowship awards from the American Heart Association, the 2014 IEEE Brain Grant Challenges Young Investigator Award, and the 2018 Interdisciplinary Rehabilitation Engineering Research Career Development Award. The research in targeted sensory motor plasticity was selected as a hot topic of 2016 by the Society of Neuroscience. She's also currently a WHALE, a NeuroHub investigator, a program aimed to foster cross-campus interdisciplinary teams of researchers to explore, create, and test bold new concepts and technologies for treating neurological and psychiatric diseases. Dr. Yazdan has recently received an Excellence in Mentorship award from the University of Washington Bioengineering Department. So to be honest, many of the words that I said, I have no idea what they mean. So they're just very fancy and impressive. So we have the honor of having Dr. Yazdan Shahmurad with us today. And the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Let me share my screen. And thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity to talk about the field of bioengineering or biomedical engineering, and also to talk about our bioengineering department at the University of Washington. So I will tell you at the beginning, I will tell you a little bit of detail about my career path, and then I will introduce the field of bioengineering, biomedical engineering, and I'll try to talk about some of the branches of this field to give you an idea about the breadth of the field, and then I'll talk about career opportunities, and we'll end with some of the information about our bioengineering program at the University of Washington. So I am from Isfahan, Iran. So Isfahan is a city in the center of Iran. So it's on the map. It's a historic place in Iran. 400 years ago, it was the capital of Iran. And, I have some photos of the city. It's a beautiful city. And from the very, very early age, I wanted to become a scientist, when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I was really mad that I was born too late and everything was already discovered and there was nothing left for me. And so I kept thinking for what is it that I can discover as a scientist when I grow up. And so in my junior year of high school, I was introduced to the field of biomedical engineering. And I was actually really fascinated by the potentials of this field. It was kind of like the marriage between medicine, biology, and engineering, and all the technologies. And so it was such an exciting field. And I was fortunate to basically get into the biomedical engineering undergraduate program at Tehran Polytechnic, or it's also called American University of Technology. That was the first university in Iran that had the biomedical engineering program as an undergraduate degree. But this department was established by people who were electrical engineers that had done some research in biomedical sciences and medicine. So the training that I got in undergraduate was mostly the training like that an electrical engineer would get, but with some additions on like learning about biophysics and biochemistry of the body, and learning about the devices that are used to basically interface with the body. And then for my master's, I joined the electrical engineering department at the University of Tehran. They had a master's program in bioelectric, but the program had like a focus mainly on image processing, signal processing. And so for my master's degree, I worked on non-invasive detection of brain tumors using MRI images. And so after my master's degree, I moved to the United States and went to the University of Michigan, the biomedical engineering department there. And I was actually really fortunate to kind of be at the right place, right time, because at the University of Michigan, I joined the lab of Dr. Daryl Kippy. So this is my PhD advisor. And his lab was working in neural engineering. So, I said like bioengineering, biomedical engineering is a marriage between medicine and engineering. And this was just a marriage between neuroscience and engineering. It was a very new and exciting field. And back then, so I started my PhD in 2006. And if you were looking at Wikipedia for neural engineering, his lab was listed there because his lab was one of the first labs and largest labs that was doing neural engineering. So I was very fortunate to be able to join his lab. And the photo I have here is a photo that we, as the lab, took when we went to Washington, D.C. for the Society for Neuroscience annual meeting, and we got a tour of the Congress, and we are imitating this painting behind us. But you see, this is like maybe like half of the lab that we went to a conference, and it was a very big lab. So for my PhD, I was studying the effects of brain stimulation on the brain, and to see, can we use brain stimulation as a therapy for stroke? And when I was going through my PhD, I realized that, I was working with neuroscientists and neurosurgeons for my thesis, and I realized that I was, raised as an engineer, and I had difficulties like basically communicating. And I had to learn the language of like neuroscientists and neurosurgeons. So that's why for my postdoc, I joined University of California, San Francisco, the Center for Integrative Neuroscience, and specifically the lab of Dr. Flip Sabis. So Flip was my postdoc advisor. And so his lab had a focus in systems neuroscience, which actually the training I got in his lab was really, really helpful for me to basically bridge that gap. An engineer who's trying to basically understand neuroscience and understand like the concepts of communicating with the brain. And so what I did in his lab was I was working on developing technologies to try to modulate the brain activity, basically control the brain with high precision. And I'll get to the details of that when I talk about different branches of bioengineering. And then I was hired as an assistant professor at the University of Washington, and I have joint appointments with the bioengineering department as well as electrical and computer engineering departments. And I also have an affiliation with the neuroscience graduate program. And so, when we get to the Q&A, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of these departments or programs. But before I also, move forward, I want to give you a little bit of explanation of like my job. So I have a tenure track faculty position, and what that means in a university such as University of Washington, it means that in addition to the traditional teaching role that a faculty member or professor has, I also have research responsibilities as well as service responsibilities. And so if you want to basically break up my time, I spend like about 65% of my time doing research. I actually have my own research laboratory, which I'll tell you a little bit about it. But then I spend about 25% of my time teaching. So I teach 3 classes in an academic year, and then the rest of my time I spend it in doing service. So, for example, serving on dissertation committees or other like departmental committees, such as like admissions committees or diversity committees, and then also mentoring. So mentoring doctoral students, postdoctoral trainees, master students. So that's how my job is defined as a tenure track faculty member. And so more specifically, I wanted to also talk about my research laboratory, which I call it the NERD Lab, or Neural Engineering and Rehabilitation Design. So in my research laboratory, we build novel neural technologies and then hope to use them to develop therapies for neurological disorders such as stroke. And so I kind of put a series of fun photos here to show you. So starting with research, this is a photo of the brain, an electrode on top of the brain that we're recording activity. And then this is a laser that is controlling the activity of the brain. And then this is a fun photo we took like during one of our experiments. And here I'm showing, I'm giving a tour to some of our undergraduate students from the bioengineering department who are interested in doing research. And also, bioengineering department, we have a tradition that in our annual party we do a baking competition. So this is a cake that we baked with the people in my lab, which got the second prize in a couple of years ago in our competition. But this is a brain that we are recording from and going to like an electrical circuit. And then the other thing, as I said, like we work on developing therapies for stroke, and American Heart Association has this Wear Red Day that each year, like one day in February that we wear red to basically promote, stopping heart disease and stroke. And so we do that in my lab, and we every year we take like a heart photo, we call that, and this is our photo for this year. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of like big picture of all the fun things we do, and then I'll get to the research a little bit later. So now so this is about like my career path and like how I got here. But now I'm going to switch gears and basically talk about bioengineering. So what is bioengineering or biomedical engineering? So you might have heard some programs across the nation call it bioengineering, and some others are calling it biomedical engineering. And so you can see it as I mentioned earlier, like a marriage between medicine and engineering, or biomedical sciences and engineering technology. So a big picture definition is the application of engineering techniques and analyses to problem solving in medicine and the biomedical sciences. And so initially, when the departments and programs were formed, they were mostly called bioengineering, but then they gradually were changed to biomedical engineering to basically cover the more clinical aspects of this field. And and as you know, this is a relatively, in comparison to the other engineering fields, it's a relatively new field. However, I want to give you a little bit of history, because applying engineering principles to medicine and biology has a long history. And so one of the very first devices that was developed is a thermometer, which I'm sure like all of you are familiar with. But it was like invented in 1625 to measure body temperature. And then the other one that I'm showing here is a stethoscope. Again, I'm sure like a lot of you are familiar with that. Then moving forward, like X-ray, that enables us to basically image body parts, and in particular bones, was introduced in 1896. Radioactivity, that has shown like medical applications, 1903. Electrocardiograph, or ECG, or you might have heard AEKG, that basically enables us to record the electrical activity of the heart, was introduced in 1887, and electroencephalographs, or EEG, again recording activity from the brain, 1924. And then some imaging technologies also, that the difference between these imaging technologies with what I showed you, X-ray, is that now you can get cross-sectional information, like from the body, such as ultrasound imaging or magnetic resonance imaging or MRIs. And then heart pacemakers in 1960. So if you're not familiar, pacemakers are these electrical devices that they generate electrical shocks to the heart, and they regulate the activity of the heart. And then last thing I want to mention here, again, like this is like in 1960s, artificial kidney or dialysis, that you probably have also heard about them. So this is like, we've had like all these technologies in 1960s before having like a defined like major such as bioengineering or biomedical engineering. And then so all of these inventions have been happening in collaboration between people like in the clinic or in medical schools with engineers with like established engineering fields. But in late 1960, early 1970s, then bioengineering programs started to form around the nation. And so I'm showing here some of the very first bioengineering programs. So Vanderbilt, University of Pennsylvania, Case Western University, and actually University of Washington also was one of the very first bioengineering programs. So a little bit more about our UW Bioengineering. So this is Robert Rushmore, who was the person who actually established our program in 1967, and by 1984. They actually started granting PhD degrees. Right now, our department has 50 core faculty. We have 947 reported inventions, and more than 44 startups came out of our department. And we have academic programs at every level. So we have an undergraduate program. We actually have 4 master's programs, and we have a PhD program. So now I'll talk about UW Bioengineering at the end too, but now I want to give you a little bit of information about the different fields of bioengineering, or different branches of bioengineering. And historically, bioengineering was like divided in 3 categories of biomechanics, biomaterials, and bioelectrics. Now, over the years, like more branches have emerged, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll cover these main three, and I'll tell you some of the exciting branches so that I can give you an idea about the breadth of this field. So starting with biomechanics, it's basically applying classical mechanics to biological or medical problems. For example, the study of movement of solids, fluids, or viscoelastic materials. The design, in particular, the design of artificial limbs is one of the major, areas of biomechanics. The other one is biomaterials. So biomaterials is studying both the living tissue as well as the artificial biomaterials that you can use to either replace a living part. And so these biomaterials can be polymers, ceramics, metals, and as well as, if they are interfacing with the living tissue. The other branch, as I said, is bioelectric. So our body produces electrical signal, and in particular, that happens in our nervous system. And so recording electrical signals from the body is a part of this bioelectric. So we've seen so far like the ECG, electrocardiograms, or EEG, electroencephalograms, like recording from the brain or recording electrical activity of the heart. You can also record electrical activity of the muscles. And then it can be electrical stimulation of the organs. So again, you've seen the pacemaker that does electrical stimulation, but there are, for example, technologies to electrically stimulate the muscles for physical therapy or rehab. And then, a lot of the devices and systems need like a control system. And so that is also under the bioelectric field. And a big part of it is also basically analyzing, understanding the signals that we're recording from the brain, from the body. And so that's signal processing and basically modeling. So that all falls under the bioelectric aspect of bioengineering. Another branch of bioengineering is medical imaging. So again, we've seen some of them that we've seen X-ray, MRI, ultrasound. So the goal here is to either get an image of the anatomy, but also the image of the physiology. So for example, there's a field in magnetic resonance imaging, which is called functional MRI, that helps you to understand the function of the brain. Another branch is medical instruments and devices. So these are a lot of the devices that are used to monitor and measure biological functions. They're used both for diagnosis or treatment. And so there are a lot of them that you probably see when you have a doctor visit, or you have like a visit to your dentist, for example. Another one, this is also a very, very exciting and growing field, is cell and tissue engineering. And so in this field, they use the anatomy, biochemistry, and mechanics of cellular and subcellular structures to understand disease processes and also to develop therapies. And so one of the really exciting areas of cell and tissue engineering is to design, maintain, and grow living tissue. So here I'm showing a 3D printer that can 3D print an artificial heart. And the last branch of bioengineering that I want to talk about is neural engineering. As I mentioned earlier, that is my area, so I'll go a little bit into more detail about this. But neural engineering is using engineering techniques to understand, repair, replace, enhance, and exploit the properties of the nervous system. And to give you an idea about the field of bioengineering, I want to talk about brain-computer interfaces that you might have heard about, but I want to start with this video. So in this video, you see this monkey that is controlling a prosthetic arm to feed itself this marshmallows. So the way the monkey is controlling this prosthetic arm is there are electrodes that are implanted in its motor cortex, so which is a part of the brain that is involved in planning and execution of movements. So the activity from his brain is processed and then mapped on movement of this prosthetic arm. And so you can see that the researcher is, moving the location of the marshmallow, and the monkey can control that prosthetic arm and feed itself. So this video right now, I think it's about 15, 20 years old, and it led to like a really, wide area of research in this brain-computer interfaces, trying to translate thoughts into actions. And then, it has been actually this technology implemented in clinic for patients with spinal cord injury. So the next video I'll show you, and it has a sound, so I won't talk over that video, is the experience of this patient using this device.
After more than a decade of paralysis from the neck down, the one thing Jan Scheumann wanted to be able to do was feed herself a bar of chocolate. Using this brain-controlled robotic arm at the University of Pittsburgh, Jan has been able to do just that. Doctors were blown away by the level of skill she achieved with the arm, controlled by her thoughts alone. It uses a new kind of computer program that translates natural brain activity used to move our limbs into commands to move the robotic arm.
There are things I regret not doing when I was able, not skydiving, but some adventures I would love to have had, and I regret not doing them now. And this is the ride of my life. I keep saying this is the roller coaster. This is the skydiving. It's just fabulous, and I'm enjoying every second of it.
The 52-year-old had an operation to insert 2 tiny grids of electrodes into the left half of her brain, where movements are controlled. Wires from the electrodes run to connectors on her head, and these are then plugged into the robotic arm. The signals from her brain are then interpreted and translated as movement.
We want her to be able to use this easily without working hard, and enjoy eating and bring that aspect of everyday life back to her.
In the future, doctors hope to build sensors into the robotic arm so patients can feel the texture and temperature of the objects they're touching.
So what I wanted to add is here, there are electrodes that are implanted in her brain. So there's interfacing with the living tissue. So there's biomaterial there, right? The electrical activity from her brain is being analyzed. And there are all these like electrical devices that are connected, that is bioelectric. It's not only that it's also, you would need to work with computer scientists and mathematicians and statisticians to basically understand that data and analyze it properly. And then it's just, this robotic arm to kind of move that arm, and that is biomechanics, right? And then I want to basically say, I'm saying this because it's just showing you how interdisciplinary this field is, and that none of this is possible without working with neuroscientists and neurosurgeons, of course. But we are also working with philosophers, because now we're recording neural data, recording all this brain activity from these patients. And there's all these ethical questions of like, who owns this data? And, how can we protect, patient privacy with this data? So this is, as you can imagine, it's like a really highly interdisciplinary field that expands beyond like one single discipline. And so that's one of the very fun parts of like being a bioengineering, working in this field, is that you get to work with all these different people. And I want to tell you, so this video ended by saying that, so now she can control this arm, right? But they wanted to incorporate sensors so they can write in information in her brain to say, okay, how heavy is this thing that she's touching with this robotic arm, or how hot it is, right? And so for that, you need to be able to stimulate the brain and basically write in information. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there are techniques for doing that using electrical stimulation, for example, or magnetic stimulation. But I want to briefly talk about this newer technology that is called optogenetics, that also enables us to modulate and control the activity of neurons in the brain. And so briefly, what is optogenetics? There are these light-sensitive ion channels that come from a certain type of algae. What we can do is that we can genetically modify neurons and place these channels on the surface of the neuron. So then by shining light into neurons, then we can control the activity of these neurons. And so remember, I talked about cell and tissue engineering. So this is a part of like cell engineering, right? And so you can have this question of like, so how can this help? So one of the things that this ways that this technology has made itself to the clinic is for cure for blindness. So there is a very common type of blindness, which is called retinitis pigmentosa. And what happens in that type of blindness is that, this is the retina. And so the light gets here. We have all these photoreceptors that, convert light into electricity and pass it down through the rest of the visual system. So what happens in this type of blindness is that these photoreceptors are damaged, but the rest of the visual system is intact. So using this technology of optogenetics, what we can do is that we can make these cells that they are healthy to be sensitive to light. And so see that now can we restore vision? So I'll let you watch this video that they tested this in mice.
In this study, researchers used optogenetics to find out if they could restore vision in blind mice. To do this, they tested a mouse's ability to swim out of a chamber in which the escape route was indicated by light. Blind mice, as shown here, cannot follow the light, so they must circle around the chamber exploring for an escape route by touch alone. Mice treated with optogenetics, however, learned to escape the chamber as fast as mice with normal vision, and they were on average nearly 3 times faster in escaping the chamber than untreated mice. In addition, the researchers found that the blind mice expressed the light-sensitive gene for at least 10 months, the duration of the study. That's important for human therapy since retinal blindness is a chronic condition.
And so right now, actually, there are a couple of companies around the world that are testing this technology for humans. And so what they do is that not only now they're changing the DNA of the retina in these patients to be sensitive to light, they're designing these glasses that can take the image from the outside world and basically project the image to the retina, similar to like how like a projector works. And we're seeing actually really exciting results coming from a few patients out of these companies. And so the last thing I want to talk about just the field of bioengineering is that telling you about what I do in my lab. And basically in my lab, we're using this technology of optogenetics to see, can we rewire the brain in a targeted way? And so why do we care about that? There are about 1 billion people worldwide that suffer from some kind of neurological disorder, and that ranges from stroke and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to psychiatric disorders such as depression. And in a lot of these disorders, what is happening is that there is an aberrant neural connectivity. So for example, in case of stroke, there are missing connections, right? That in case of like a psychiatric disorder, there could be connections in the brain that are not supposed to be there, and they disable the person from having a normal life. So the idea here is that, can we use these technologies and either make new connections when there are missing connections, or can we delete the connections that are not supposed to be there, and basically using that, developing a cure for these disorders. Now I'm gonna switch gears again, and I hope, like, you know, as I said, I didn't cover all of the branches of bioengineering, but I gave some ideas about what is the breadth of this field and what are the possibilities that one can do. Okay, so career opportunities. I have listed all of the career opportunities that are available for different degrees, bachelor's, master's, and PhD. One of the main paths is industry that is available for basically all of our graduates at any level. So one of them is that and then there are companies with, like, medical devices companies, pharmaceuticals or therapeutic companies, also consulting companies. There are both startups and large companies that our students, go to. Of course, another path is academia. So, continuing after undergraduate to, higher education. And if you want to stay in academia, even like as an undergraduate or a master's, there are opportunities for research and teaching. The other is that, you can have opportunities in medicine or healthcare. So, for example, there are job opportunities at hospitals that you can work as like a clinical engineer. There's basically helping with purchasing and maintenance of hospital medical devices, and then also there are opportunities at the government, so at the National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, and as well as FDA. Also, there are also some other opportunities in basically in law. And so there's some people who, after they graduate, they get hired actually by these companies that they are willing to pay you to go to law school and get a degree so that you can help them as a person who has these specialties to help them. Sometimes, that can be patent law, but there are other also branches of law that you can continue this. For our undergraduate students, usually a third of them go to industry, a third of them go to grad school, and a third of them go to medical school. And then we have some that go to MD, PhD programs. So I will tell you a little bit of our UW Bioengineering program. One of the main focuses and in our department is that we value justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we have been working to diversify our community at every level, at levels of students, staff, and faculty. But we don't only value diversity, but we value inclusion and equity. So we have been doing a lot of work to create an equitable and inclusive environment for everyone. We have our faculty have been going through a lot of training to create an equitable, inclusive environment. We have been doing a lot of effort to build a community among like all of the people in the department across different levels. We are working to create transparency with all of the processes in our department, and really trying to create a supportive environment to enhance diverse perspectives, both in research and teaching, and to create like this inclusive and equitable environments in the classroom as well as in the research laboratories. Our UW Bioengineering department is part of both School of Medicine and College of Engineering. And as I mentioned, this is a highly interdisciplinary field. So that is also evident by a lot of actually research centers across the campus that work directly with the bioengineering department, or they were started through the faculty at the bioengineering department. So I've listed some of them here. So Washington National Primate Research Center is one of the 7 primate research centers across the country, and several of our faculty are either affiliated with them or work with them. Center for Neurotechnology, that's a center across 3 different institutions bringing researchers from MIT, San Diego State University, and UW, but it's actually housed at UW. While NeuroHub is another initiative between UW, UCSF, and UC Berkeley towards developing therapies for neurological and psychiatric disorders. We have UW Institute for Neuroengineering, which is funded by the Washington Research Foundation. We have the Institute for Stem Cell and Regenerative Medicine, UW Center for Translational Muscle Research. Like, both of these have like a really high number of bioengineering faculty active in those centers. We have Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at our radiology department that works closely with our faculty, and again, some of our faculty, a large number of faculty, are affiliated with that center as well. And so these are like some of them that I listed here, but the field is so broad, and it is bringing so many disciplines together to solve these problems in medicine and biomedical sciences. We do have a program at our department, which is called Bioengage, that bridges a gap between our department and the industry, like biotechnology and biomedical industry in Seattle, as well as other places. I also wanted to say we have 4 master's programs. One of them is a BSMS program, which means that our undergraduate students, if they meet a certain criteria, they can stay for an additional year and get a master's degree. We have a traditional master's degree, which is like a 2-year thesis-based, but we also have a master's of applied bioengineering, and this is just a 1-year program for people who want to acquire expertise in this field and basically find a path in either clinical or medical devices field. And then we also have an online master's in pharmaceutical engineering. We have several active student organizations that are like working closely with our faculty and staff in creating opportunities for students. So, for example, one of them is BioExplore, which works with all of the research laboratories across the department to create research opportunities for our undergraduate students. So with that, I'm going to end and open it up for questions. And I'm happy to answer any question you have about field of bioengineering, biomedical engineering, or about UW bioengineering in particular.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yazan Shahmarat. It was very informative, very useful. I'm sure that people learned a lot, including myself. Anybody from the audience, feel free to ask your questions. I'm sure that Dr. Shahmarat will answer that. I have several questions myself, but I want the audience to have the chance to ask questions first.
Can I start?
Go ahead, Roshana.
So can you maybe share a little bit more with students and families how, when they apply for UW bioengineering program, do they apply to the major? Do they apply to the college? Do they need to know right off the bat that they are applying for bioengineering? Is it harder or easier to kind of come in and then apply later? Just that process from high school to university.
So I believe that now they have this direct to college program at the University of Washington, that they do apply to that, because before we did not have that, and they were applying to the University of Washington, and then in their freshman they were applying, for example, to bioengineering or other ones. Now they have this option of applying to directly to the College of Engineering, And then during their freshman year, they'll do this application to different departments, and then the college does placement for different people. What I do know is that so the bioengineering department is very popular, and so like a lot of times, like among like maybe like 60% of people who are admitted to the college want to do bioengineering, but unfortunately right now I think our cap is about 80 or 85 something students that we can take every year. There are efforts to increase that, but we still don't have the resources to do that. So one thing I want to say though is that, and a lot of times I say this to students, is that if you don't get to kind of basically don't get placed with bioengineering, there are still so many other places that you can get similar experiences. So for example, you can use that, you can basically go to the electrical and computer engineering department and get like very similar experiences.
Yeah, I had a very similar question about basically the transfer process. This is mainly for people who are freshmen at this point, let's say. So they are in some other majors, like say electrical engineering or computer science, which are the obvious candidates, but in any other field. So what is the path? Do people even have a chance of switching to bioengineering?
You know, so if like during undergraduate to switch to bioengineering, I honestly don't know how that would work. I basically, if for graduate school, like if you wanted to graduate school for bioengineering, there's like basically no limits. Like you can come from any undergraduate program and enter the bioengineering master's or PhD. So, you know, we have students ranging from like a biology degree to physics degree, math degree, and all sorts of engineering that they come to our PhD program or a master's program. So for that, there's no limitation. But as for like switching majors, I don't know the details of that.
Okay. Yeah, but it seems that there's flexibility for people, even at least in the graduate level, if they want to switch to bioengineering.
Yes. So, you know, because I said, like, as I said, like, this is just highly interdisciplinary. And so basically, like any lab that you go to for your graduate degree, there's so much that your expertise from what you're bringing from your undergrad can be utilized.
Right.
And so there's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah. So with all these different majors, different branches, I'm sure that everybody will be in need. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have one question in the chat. So JD is asking, in bioengineering, do students study both biology branch as well as engineering?
No. So we do have, so what happens is that we do have core classes in bioengineering that as a bioengineering student, you have to take all of the core classes, and then you have electives. So the core classes are designed to give you a full picture of what is bioengineering and what are the different, like basically give you an introduction of the different prospects, but also to equip you to move forward. So for example, there are classes that have a center in circuit design and electrical engineering, but they are in conjunction with, for example, recording muscle activity and analyzing muscle activity, right? So it has that component to it. But also there are classes that talk about computational biology, right? So again, it has a focus in math, but the applications are like in biology, like modeling biological signals. So all of them have the engineering component, but giving you the tools that you need to basically move forward in any of these branches. And then with your electives, then you can basically get like more focus in any of these areas. And so you can basically, for example, if you're doing like if you are interested in cell and tissue engineering, then you can take classes like in biochemistry, for example, that will help you with that. We do also have some minors. So for example, we do have a minor in neuroengineering, which if you take a series of courses, then in addition to your degree, you can also get a minor to your degree. We also have a minor in data science. That's also like a new minor.
Can somebody pick basically bioengineering as a minor?
No, so bioengineering is actually a major, but then like under that, then there are these minors that they can.
So no, I mean about just double major. That's what I was talking
about. So I think you can. Again, I'm not aware of that process, like how that would work, and I don't know of anyone who's doing that. So
okay. And there's one more question from Ellie. She's saying, are there any information for high school kids to know what HS courses are required to get into the undergraduate degree?
And by HS means high school?
HS courses, I don't know what that means. High school courses.
Oh, to get into bioengineering, what high school courses? Yeah. So as far as I know, there are no, like, nobody's looking at your, what you took in high school, but they're looking at your GPA and your other application material. But you, depending on, so you can work with, like, for example, our bioengineering undergraduate advisors to see what would be some of the courses that you can take during your freshman year that can help with bioengineering. And sometimes that's what our students do. So they do know that they want to do bioengineering, so they start taking courses that can help them with the, like, bioengineering. So, like, for example, they take like biology or some of the, I think, like main, like, engineering courses, like, again, depending on, and that's another thing actually. So a lot of our freshmen that end up in bioengineering, they start doing, like, joining a research laboratory and doing research from the freshman year before even they're placed in the bioengineering program. And that helps them because they are now directly in contact with, like, a professor or with the other people in the lab who are, like, PhD students or other undergraduate students that can help them, like, choose the courses that can also be helpful for the actual degree.
Yeah, Eddie has a follow-up question. She says, in particular, if the kids are going for the Running Start program. Do you know about that?
Running Start program?
Yeah, Running Start is a program in high school that they start college courses earlier.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the high school. I don't know. I mean, you can. So I'm not familiar with those courses, and so I don't know what they are. But you can definitely, like, look through our curriculum and see what are the courses that we are covering that can help. What I can tell is that I teach sophomores. So basically, when they start at our department, I'm like one of the very first professors they see, and so the course that I teach, like, really is heavy on physics. And so sometimes I see that students could have benefited from, like, a stronger, like, physics. So, like, understanding, for example, capacitors and inductors and, those things. So I don't know if this is helpful, but I think you can definitely look at our curriculum and see what would be kind of like a better match for you. like what courses you take.
All right, thank you. There's another question. Which colleges or universities offer this degree?
Oh, bioengineering, biomedical engineering. So a lot of the kind of like major research universities offer the degree. And so, like, for example, like, you know, like the high ranking like universities, like all of them offer this. I mean, as I said, like, you know, people started, like, these programs started forming in 1960s, but now we see a lot of them across universities, and it's actually really growing. I see it on the faculty side of like how many openings they have for faculty, and so it's showing that how they're basically increasing it. And yes, UW, yeah, of course, UW offers it, so that
yeah, you're the professor there, so of course they offer it. And so there's another question: should students need to be good at math also?
So I mean, I think define good, but I think they should know math, and they should be comfortable with math, because you know, everything that you do has a good degree of math, but it's not super complicated math, right? So unless you are sometimes people are like modeling tissue properties, for example. Or sometimes they are doing like complicated statistical analysis that you would need to do like really complicated math. But for the most part, you have to have a good understanding of like the basic math to be able to grasp what is happening. A lot of times, even when you want to implement complicated like algorithms or implement complicated signal processing, there are packages that you can use that you wouldn't necessarily need to, for example, write that code, but you would need to understand it, because you would need to understand what is happening, right? So as long as you can understand the process, you're good. But so you don't need to basically develop like new mathematical
Models.
Well, no, I mean mathematical. So that's what I said. Like mathematical models, you might need to do it. And so for that, you need to have a good math. But basically, you're not like bringing like a new like approach of like of math, like of handling something. You're not expected to do that, but you're expected to basically understand it at least, right?
Yeah. All right. So another question is, what's your daily lab work like as a professor?
Yeah. So my my daily work as a professor is mostly I'm sitting at my computer, especially these days that like the meetings are like via Zoom also. And I have students, PhD students, master students, undergraduate students, and postdoctoral scholars. They all work in my research laboratory, and whenever they need my supervision and they need me to be there and help them with something, I'm there. But most of the times, they know what they're doing, and I'm sitting at my computer, either writing grants, writing papers, teaching. Like teaching is also, you know, some part of my daily activities, and a lot of meetings. We do surgeries, for example. And so when we are doing surgeries, then I'm there too. And I'm kind of like the main surgeon, basically, that I do that. But those are like happens like once or twice a year. But most of the times I am at my office, sitting at my desk. And
Did I hear that right? So you are a surgeon? Are you doing surgery on humans?
Not humans, no.
Okay.
No, not humans. So we work with animal models. And so those are the surgeries that, for example, you saw that monkey
Yeah,
moving prosthetic arm. So we do these brain implants that we can record from the brain, and we can basically stimulate the brain. Also, we do these genetic modifications that I showed you. So we inject viral vectors to genetically modify neurons in the brain to be able to control them.
I see. Okay. So another question Lisa is asking, are there any internships for high school students that would help them get experience and decide if this is a good field for them?
Well, thank you so much for asking this. Yes, there are actually a lot of opportunities for high school students to get involved in research. The Center for Neurotechnology in particular has a program for high school students. I think it's called research experience for high school students. They have an application process, but then if you get in, then you get to spend a whole summer in the research laboratory and basically experience, how it is. And sometimes actually high school students are so good that they kind of end up being either publishing a paper or being an author on a paper. So yes, there are opportunities for high school students to get involved. There also, sometimes also you don't even need to go through a program. So you can just directly contact the professor, and then they might have an opportunity for you to basically go and work in their research lab. Some of the labs have, depending on the location, have some limits on age. So sometimes you cannot work in a lab if you're under 21. But there are a lot of labs that are open to that, and there's no limits to that. So right now, actually, we are writing a grant to NIH to be able to get actually funding for some of the high school students to be able to actually, so for us to be able to pay them to come and do some research in our lab. And there are programs like that in our school, but also other schools across the country that you can apply to. And they're like really, really fun and good programs.
It's fascinating. Okay, so that's a wonderful opportunity. Please, could you provide some links for high school students? So this is a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, so it's for these opportunities for the research, you mean? So I don't have the links ready now, but one of the things you can do, you can just Google Center for Neurotechnology. And in the Center for Neurotechnology, you can see the opportunities that they have for high school students. So that's one of them that I know. The other ones, I have to basically look through them to basically find them. But the Center for Neurotechnology one is the one that, for sure, it's an active one.
Great. And one last question. Do you think this is a good field for a nurse to join? I know this is for high school students, but it's interesting to me. If you have a bachelor degree, how long would this program take?
Definitely. One thing that I would suggest is that if you already have a bachelor's degree, then you can join our graduate program. And so basically, you can do a master's. As I said, we have 4 different master's programs, but depending on your interest, you could do a master's or PhD. And I have served on our admissions committee, the graduate admissions committee, and I can tell you a little bit of like what they're looking for. But as long as you have a compelling story of like, this is my background, and this is why I want to get a master's degree or a PhD degree in bioengineering, and of course, and then they look at your package holistically. So we're not only looking at, for example, your GPA or your, we stopped looking at GREs, so no GREs, but we look at everything. We look at your background, your experiences, your goal, and as well as what is your what are the other people, like your letter writers, are telling about like working with you or about your future career. So yeah, I think if I were you with a bachelor's degree, I would have applied for a graduate program.
All right, great. So there's no other question. I have one last question to ask. So one of the main challenges of the human society in general was COVID over the past couple of years. So has there been any application for bioengineering in the maybe treatments of COVID or finding vaccines or any of that?
Yeah, definitely. So there has been several research that I know of from my colleagues that they have been working on. So several of them have been working on these home tests for COVID. Right. So that's something that they have been working on. So like rapid, accurate home tests, affordable, and then another area that, or different areas that people have been working on is basically computational modeling. So for example, one of my colleagues, he has been working on trying to analyze the data, the signals that any patient that is hospitalized, the signals that are collecting from that patient, any patient that's hospitalized. So for example, ECG, like body temperature, blood pressure and all of that. And so using AI and machine learning to see, based on that, can he predict the severity of COVID symptoms, right? So there are like these types of research that are also ongoing. And then in our department, I don't know of anyone who has been working on vaccine development. However, in the Washington National Private Research Center, several groups are working on vaccines for COVID-19. And so we actually have a very strong program there that, for example, when Zika virus came, they were the first people who worked on developing a vaccine and basically understanding Zika. And they have also been really, really active for COVID-19.
Wonderful. It's fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Yazan Shamurat. We learned a lot, and thanks for your time. I know that you're very busy, but you gave us your time and your valuable knowledge. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me.
So with that, I